Hi all, our notable game today is from the engine world. Currently TCEC Season 8 is underway at Stage 3, and this game features Houdini 4 versus Komodo version 1501.01. Okay, so Houdini playing white played G3. I think the openings are given to them and later they get to swap colours just to sort of reduce the bias of the opening sequence. So we have G6, Bishop G2, Bishop G7, D4, Knight F6, E4, D6, Knight E2. It looks like fairly standard opening theory. In fact, in Livebook, there's over 2,000 games in Livebook for Knight BC3, E5, H3. Quite often Knight C6 is played here. Also C6 is very popular. White castles. Knight Bg7 is popular here as well as B5. B5 was chosen. A3. And here usually Bishop B7 is played. There's 35 games of that. In this game we have Queen C7. So we're coming out of book now with Queen C7. And there's been 7 games apparently, at least 7 major games with Bishop E3. Here though, quite interestingly, G4 was played. Now G4, yes, it actually seems to carry a potential threat of G5 at the right moment. For example, if Knight BD7, white could punt D5 here. And if CD, then we insert G5, and it's quite nifty because there's no in-between moves. We're going to take and take here. And if the knight moves, then we get knight takes D5, tempo gaining on that queen on C7 with a small advantage for white. It's a pleasant position for white. So, okay, so G4 encourages black to release the tension in the center. Maybe it like wasn't completely mandatory, but it's to do with this G5 issue. It seems that black took on D4 and knight takes D4, and in theory, technically here we have this backward pawn on D6 strategically, which could be an issue because there could be pressure down that D file. But of course black enjoys pressure on the E pawn. Also tactically in this position there's a loose rook on A8 potentially, and in fact knight taking on B5 could be dangerous for black here. Hence we see this move Bishop B7, which I think takes that into account, because if the move rook E8, knight takes, and then we have E5, and this is quite good for white, hitting that rook, hitting F6. It could be terrible for black. For example, this is a ridiculous continuation showing how dangerous it could be. Yes, disaster for black. So black, yeah, plays what seems to be a sensible move, Bishop B7. Now here we have Bishop F4, which looks at D6, and it seems to have some coordination on D6. Now black takes a slight liberty, it seems, in not playing Rook D8. Rook D8 might be the safest way to approach things here from a very theoretical point of view. But okay, black played Knight BD7. Now maybe like an ordinary move now, like Knight B3, then black could play Knight E5, fending off the pressure on D6. But let's see, in this position, after Knight BD7, can you guess what Houdini 4 played? If I give you 5 seconds, starting from now, you might want to pause the video. Okay, quite a neat looking move, which drew my attention to this game really, Knight F5. So first thing to take off that important dark square bishop. If that's taken off, of course the dark square weaknesses are pretty bad. So, and of course there's a double attack, yeah. So black has only got a move. And yeah, takes that knight. So we have bishop takes D6, so one pawn, and it's also going to be an exchange, winning an exchange here. Takes. And now E takes F5, 2 pawns. So 2 pieces are not usually good to win a rook, but it's 2 pawns as well. But not only that, this bishop has been liberated. And potentially also, not only that, it's not also about liberation, it's about squashing the opponent's pieces, deliberating the opponent's pieces. And in fact, this bishop could easily find itself hemmed in with a pawn avalanche later. So it's not just about the white pieces looking potentially good. The black pieces could be squished a bit. Let's see what happens now. Knight b6 is played by Komodo. And we have rook e1. Knight fd5. So black is establishing a piece at d5. White now plays knight e4. And we have here the move bishop g7. White protects that pawn, blunting the bishop. And now we have knight f4, which is only a temporary inconvenience, really, because bishop f1. And the queen can come to f3 and kick that knight back. And this happens basically in advance. Well, the knight just goes back in advance, and we have queen f3. Okay, the bishop is not so sad on f1. Queen c7. And it looks as though at various points f6 could be handy, but it's kept as an option. Rook ad1. Knight d7, as though there's an interest in stopping f6, but that's renewed as a potential card to play. Now g5 supporting f6, which would squish the bishop a little bit. King h8. And then we have interesting play on the queen side, a4, as though there's a challenge made to black's structure. It's trying to undermine black's structure. Dislodge this knight. And if takes, then maybe c4 is an option. So black just reinforces that. He wants the engine wants to keep a post on d5. Bishop g2, rook g8. But now we have a lot of pressure emerging after queen h5, hitting pawn on f7, also introducing possibly either f6 or g6. So because f6 wasn't committed to, there's also this extra option now of g6, which could be dangerous for black. Black plays knight e5, so of course that defends f7, and it seems to try and defend also g6. Queen h4. As though there's an interest potentially now, again, in playing f6, potentially, or g6 at the right time, or also, of course, queen h4 supports potentially f4 to kick this defensive knight away from the protection of f7 and g6. So f4 might be useful. So black maybe gets in a little bit of a quandary here, because this knight, if it's really kicked with f4, and it's difficult to see what can be done about that usefully. Black makes a concession here, blocks in his own bishop, blocks in the bishop with f6, and it does allow the seemingly very comfortable move g6. So not only this bishop is squished, this bishop, as I say from before, looks very useful potentially. We have h6, so a very bad looking bishop. And not only that, you can imagine maybe a knight usefully coming to h5 later, putting pressure on things. We have, though, a takes b5, and now a takes b5. Knight g3, yes, as though knight h5. Bishop c8. And now very interesting centralization, queen d4. So there's various ideas with queen d4, not just supporting f4, but also maybe rook a1 to a7. So the pressure is being felt on these knights here, which seem to be like trying to guard black's position. A knight retreats. And here, actually, we have queen e4 with the direct threat, it seems, of f4, just winning material because of the pressure on e7. So the knight goes back. And now rook a1. Which again, you know, if queen d4 happens again, then there will be rook a7. White's taking this quite casually, it seems. Probing, testing, bishop d7. And now the queen does go to d4, so we have got both f4 and rook a7 now on the cards. It's like black's position is a little bit fragile, and white is probing and taking time to test various things before making some progress, potentially. Queen c8, and here progress is made. What else could black do? Yes, against this f4. It seems black looks pretty helpless here, actually. The pieces are so passive. So against f4, it's difficult really to suggest things. For example, on knight b6, b4 is representing quite a lockdown. This is just an example. Say like this, white could start infiltrating the position, maybe. This infiltration here would mean, actually, black's in a pretty bad way. This kind of infiltration. If you imagine this position with a rook on the 7th and another one potentially joining that rook there, and in conjunction with knight h5, you have 3 pieces then which will drill their way to h7. So that kind of scenario is not very pleasant. So yeah, black plays queen c8 and allows f4. So black's losing material now. Bishop takes f5. It can't move this knight, basically. If he moves the knight, b3 is basically losing that knight. Say knight d6, c4. Our knight's going to be lost there. And here the knight's just getting trapped, it would seem. So we have knight d6, sorry, in that variation. So f4 is played, bishop takes f5, and black's losing some material after knight takes f5. Black's idea was knight takes g6. So black has taken both the aggressive pawns, but at some cost. Black finds itself now, potentially the exchange down. We have knight g takes f4, which basically traps that knight kind of ingeniously, of course. But black is still the exchange down after rook a7. We have knight takes g2, king takes g2, rook takes g7, rook takes g7, king takes g7. Black is the exchange down for 2 pawns, but the king is a little bit shaky here. Check. And now king h2, making way for rook g1, check. 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 Yes, getting 1 pawn back soon now. Queen takes h6. So black is really just an exchange down for a pawn. And this is a very dangerous pass pawn potentially. We have check. Rook a1. So black's king is in grave danger now. Check. King g2. Check. King f2. Knight b6. We have b4. f4. Rook g1. Yeah. Rook g7. Check. And now c4 is pretty crushing. The knight can't take because of mating on a7 with the rook or queen. We have queen e6 here being played. Now h5 play on both sides of the board is difficult to stop. Black plays f3, and after c takes b5 now, black resigned in this position. Let's have a look. Or maybe the operator on its behalf resigned because the evaluation is so bad. Let's have a look at the final position. What's going on here? Well, if c takes b, apparently there's a mate in 10 here. Can you spot it? No, actually, if you can spot the first 2 moves, that's good enough, because check would force knight a4. Then rook g6 basically wins the queen, and it's pretty clear that's hopeless. And if king takes b5, in this position, that pin is fatal, rook b7. there's a token check here, and yeah, you could throw in a token check here, but then after king f4, check, king g5, check, well, takes there. If that's the only check, then that's it. Yeah, so the pin is pretty fatal there. After king takes rook b7, yeah, the pin's pretty fatal. Okay, I thought it was an interesting game to have a quick look at because of that move. Knight f5 caught my attention this morning, so I've been checking out. You can check out these engine versus engine games on the chessbomb site, chessbomb.com. So some of the engine games, they show some dynamic, aggressive sacrifices, which creates not just an evaluation change, but a more fundamental than that, a trends change in evaluation. And I think that's a trend changer move, knight f5, because it creates that trend because it ignites certain liberations on white's perspective and suppresses the opponent's pieces at the same time. So there's a great trend occurring of black's pieces being pushed back, the black bishop being stuck behind its own pawns, the white queen actually enjoying greater mobility around the center, and the black knight starting to look fragile and kickable back with things like f4, winning even more material later. So the general mobility of all the white pieces was enhanced with the move knight f5, and that's a move which, yes, even the great Komodo, which on some rating lists tops, the computer rating list at the moment, Komodo. So even the great Komodo couldn't see the trends changing move, knight f5. And it's that sort of stuff which makes chess such an incredibly dynamic game. That even computers with their enormous processing power, there's these trend changing moves which I think we should check out from time to time. And in this game, what stunned me was knight f5 when looking at it this morning. So I hope you enjoyed that one. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.